Hi there, it's Amanda from Rolling Hills Landscapes, and this video is going to cover the basics of gravity wall construction, segmented retaining walls, in other words, individual pieces like Versa-Lok. I'm going to reference that because it's something that we install more often than not, and these are walls that don't need to be reinforced because they don't have another extra load on top of or behind the wall. So this is kind of retaining wall 101 for your basic run-of-the-mill, up to about 3.5 feet. Again, pretty level behind the wall or a slight slope, but nothing like a driveway on top of it or heavier load, like, it's right up against a house or something like that. So this cross section can be found on Versa-Lok's website, and it's my go-to whenever I am walking through the pieces of a retaining wall with a homeowner. So we're going to start from the ground up. We have first the parts that are going to be underground. So let's say we had a wall here and we're going to replace it with some new Versa-Lok. The first thing we do, take down that wall, and even if there is a concrete footer under there, we want to get that out and we want to start fresh with the site soils. So the ground level that you see here with these little pieces that represent grass, we're going to dig below that ground level 12 inches. That's going to give you 6 inches of base depth and 1 full buried block. In some cases, especially if a wall steps up or down, so the ground's like this, and we need the wall to come across here, you are going to have a little more than a block buried, and you may have, maybe like 9 inches of base in some cases, but this is going to be just pretty standard. So let's just assume the ground's flat. We're going to dig down 12 inches. And then you can see that block is centered in this trench. So a standard Versa-Lok block is 16 inches wide, and front to back it's 12 inches, and then it's 6 inches tall. And so we want to take that front to back dimension, 12 inches, and we want to double it. And that is the size of the width of this trench. Okay, so this is 12 inches. The base preparation is going to be 24 inches. And then the base is going to extend about 6 inches on either side of the end of the wall. You're going to prepare base beyond just where you set the block. So we don't want block to have ground contact on the bottom. We want to have the base. Something that we like to do is when we dig out and we use a plate compactor over the site soils, we like to put a piece of filter fabric just to separate the soil from the base material. Just a little bit extra, just so that you don't have cross-contamination. So once we have that trench dug out, we get the base in. The base that we use is 2A modified limestone. So that's going to be everything from really small fine pieces to about 2-inch pieces, all angular stone. Some walls can be built on a 57 size limestone, and that's going to be all of like those 2-inch size pieces. If something like that happens, it's something that's going to need to have a way for that water to get out, to drain out from around the wall. So that would be an open grade base. More water can get through the void space between the stone, but we defer to the 2A modified base. So it packs in very firmly when you run a plate compactor over that to get it in place. So it's going to be concrete-like in that way, but it's not rigid like concrete. It's going to flex. So this whole system is meant to flex with the changing season. So here in southwestern Pennsylvania, we have a lot of freeze-thaw cycles. I would say probably one of the worst case scenarios for doing hardscapes like this. Some places up north, you get a deep freeze and it stays like that for the season. Down south, they don't have this And we're in the middle sometimes where, you know, it's crazy weather. Sometimes we have a 60-degree day, and then it'll drop down to 20 degrees overnight. And we get these swings back and forth that can all wreak havoc on your wall if it's not done to these specifications. So the granular leveling pad that we have here, minimum 6 inches thick, that's our 2A modified. Then we have our first course centered in that trench. And this part is going to be the longest in a gravity wall where we don't have reinforcement behind the wall. And I'll get into that in another video. But with this format, the most time-consuming piece of putting the wall up is generally the base course. Why? Because we want it to be, I don't want to say perfect. Nothing's perfect in this world, but it needs to be level. So the blocks are getting put in place. They're getting pounded down. They're getting checked with a level, the front and back, side to side, to make sure that this foundation for the wall is sound. So you can see where we're only digging down 12 inches too, to compare this to like a poured concrete wall, you're going to go down at least 40 inches below the frost line. So you're saving on all of that excavation. Once we get to this first course and start building on top with our other subsequent courses, we're going to have dug out behind the wall another 12 inches, a place for something we call backfill. All right, so we're building the wall. There's a pipe back here behind behind this, I'll say the second course generally. So behind the back of the wall, and every 40 feet or less, depending on the wall, it's going to outlet through the face of the wall. So we want that pipe to be here. If it's too low, that water's going to build up behind there, but we want the water to have a place to outlet above ground so that it doesn't build up behind there. Everything is about getting the water and diverting it away from the wall so it doesn't wreak havoc on the wall and those freeze-thaw cycles don't push it forward. You can also see where there is a setback where the wall appears to be stepping into the slope. We call that batter. For Versa-Lok specifically, and for different block, it's going to be different. We have 3/4 of an inch of batter for every course of block you go up. So every 6 inches we go up, we're going back 3/4 of an inch. And it's going to step like that the whole way up to the top. So when I say that we're excavating back into the slope, we have 12 inches for the block, 12 inches for that drainage aggregate, that 57 size limestone. But we have a batter. We're actually going to dig back slightly more than 24 inches. So a lot of times when we mark it to dig, or when I talk to homeowners, I say that you're going to, especially if there's plants on top, anything within 30 inches of where the front of the wall is going to be at the base is going to come out. So because we have to account for this space here and back, that the wall's not going to be straight up and down, we're going to go back into the slope. With Versa-Lok specifically, each of these courses is held together by pins. They're like a nylon material, which doesn't sound very strong. They're very strong. 2 per block. Some other blocks will have a like a bump on top of one block and then an indentation on the bottom of the other, and they kind of lock together. That'll give you a setback. Some of them, if you see the block at like the big box stores, some of them have a lip on the back for that. So there are a few different ways to do it. But again, I'm just referencing Versa-Lok. It's the most common block that we work with. So we have that drainage stone. We have the pipe back here. It's a 4-inch corrugated perforated pipe. It's not a French drain, and that's one misconception. A lot of people say, well, there'll be a French drain behind the wall. A French drain, a true French drain, is open and it's at the surface and it's gathering that water that's on top of the ground. The idea behind this system with the pipe behind here is that this is going to catch just incidental water that makes its way down through the ground, but it's not meant to capture all of the water and then spit it out, through either the pipe at the end of the wall or one of these drains through the face. The goal is that you have ground leading up to the back of the wall that is about the same height or maybe even a little bit higher than those caps. And the water, especially once you put soil on top, and we have clay soils that just shut off that water, and grass, that stuff is going to just sheet off over the wall and onto the ground in front, so it doesn't even make its way back behind the wall. This diagram says impervious fill, so your dirt, mulch, things like that. For the top 12 inches, usually we're only about maybe 6 inches on top. And this is another spot where we're going to put a piece of filter fabric just above the backfill, that's 57 stone, the drainage material, to separate that from the soil so the soil doesn't work its way down. Some things that have been common in the past that are no longer best practices, just through research, it's been found that for the pipe behind the wall, they used to have a sock on them, thinking that the sediment would stay out and this would keep that pipe clear. It was actually found that that's counterproductive. So we don't do a sock on that pipe. Running filter fabric all the way up behind the wall. Again, that's something that's not going to allow the water to filter through. It's not going to, the system's not going to work the way that it necessarily should. The last part on top is the caps. So if you look at the top of a Versa-Lok, there are the pinholes and then there are a few ridges, and some of those are places where you can, like if you want a double-sided block, you knock the back off, get that textured face, and you can put that side facing out. But all of that stuff needs covered up whenever it's time to finish off the wall. So we have these caps. The caps are roughly 3.5 inches tall. They are going to sit forward a little bit for a slight overhang. Aesthetically, just a lot nicer, looks more finished. And then all that dirt's going to fill in behind here, so you on top, so you don't see the backs of the block or the caps. So that is retaining wall 101. Again, for just your basic walls, nothing too crazy that's holding up a big load. But some things to look out for when you are checking out retaining walls. If you see them kind of mid-construction, a lot of times I'll see pictures posted on social media, and the walls that I see that that some other folks are putting together, that they're not digging as deep as they should. And there's not as much drainage material behind the wall as there should be. And the other is that I see walls being built straight up and down rather than having that batter back into the slope. So batter is going to give you strength. The depth below the ground is going to prevent heaving. And, behind the wall, if everything is up against dirt, the dirt's going to grab the moisture. It's going to expand when it freezes, and it keeps pushing the wall forward over time. That dirt then starts to go down behind the wall, and the wall can never bounce back. So it really has one way to go, and that's forward. And what's nerve-wracking, just from a perspective of having that knowledge and having seen some scary walls and some walls that we've taken down and how easily they've fallen, reading articles about people getting hurt, or if somebody's been killed by retaining walls, that happens. That sometimes the walls don't show symptoms of failure, but sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll bow, sometimes they'll be shifted, they'll be leaning in the wrong direction, and blocks separating from one another, especially on corners and on curves. And that's really when it's critical to take care of it before it falls. So in another video, I talk about insurance not covering the cost of a retaining wall. It's seen as a maintenance for your issue for your home. So it's really important to take care of that before the wall says that it's time to go. And they don't really give you warning. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an understanding. Maybe your head's spinning, and I'm sorry for throwing a lot at you. Again, this cross-section can be found on Versa-Lok's website. I'm happy to link to it, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. My ultimate goal is to make sure that you don't have to be an expert in this, but to know the basics of what is right and what is not right, and make sure that if you're going to make that investment, that your dollars are well spent. Thanks, and have a good day.